Baruuk, always so hyper offensive and defensive. With his own uniqueness, he can become extremely tanky and overpowered with his Serene Storm. That's why you usually just go with Serene Storm build almost every time with Baruuk. But I feel like that was so boring because we just play the same things again with the same frame. So I was thinking that, can we make a very different Baruuk build here? But turns out I did have one. But the outcome was so weird and so underwhelming that I would not recommend you to try this out. But I will still share how I try to tweak this frame so that it can play differently. So without further ado, let's hop right into it. When we go for Serene Storm build, we know that we will always get rid of his first ability, Elude. That's because Elude and Serene Storm both cannot go well with each other. What does that mean? You see, Elude can only able to dodge damage if you are not attacking, and this will deactivate if you use your guard and your melee weapon, and this also includes Serene Storm. Consider that we're always trying to attack almost every time with Serene Storm. Elude will prove almost useless, despite it can remove restraint quite fast. That's why, in our Serene Storm build, we never really want to keep Elude. However, this is the part where I decided to tweak. I want to keep Elude and try to maximize its own uses. That's why I decided to get rid the ability that go against Elude, which is Serene Storm. You see, for Elude, it can actually become so useful because of how easy it is to dodge almost all damage. The only thing that it cannot dodge is the AoE damage. But this is where our Desolate Hand comes in. If let's say we not care about remove the restraint, then it can disarm the enemies. This also means that we can force those AoE weapons to be disarmed. That way they are forced to use melee attack, which is still acceptable for Elude. Since Elude can help us to stay survive as long as possible without considering about any restraint, then I think Lull is the best ability to crowd control for Baruuk. Unfortunately, it didn't go as well as the others did. That's because Lull actually got two durations here. You can see that there's a short and a long one. The short duration is the duration that will cause them to become slow. At this point, you are not able to spam the Lull. But after this short duration is up, it will enter the long duration where enemy will start to become to sleep. This is the part where enemies will temporarily sleep and you can recast again. Why I say temporarily? Because most attack can actually trigger them to awake easily. This also includes the most useful companion, Panzerwurfpfeiler. Panzerwurfpfeiler Baruuk can actually cause them to become awake. This is why for this build, we do not want to use Panzerwurfpfeiler because it will immediately cause them to wake up. But don't forget that Lull also got its own augment, Endless Lullaby. Endless Lullaby had a passive that can increase the sleep duration of Lull by 50%, and it can also allow you to continue spread Lull if you either finishing kill or directly kill asleep enemies, but both might be affected by Lull. Consider that you always Lull enemy before you kill the enemies, this is always work. And because we will be relying on certain attack, which is the finishing kill, this will help you to keep spreading until the duration is runs out. Despite all the abilities that Baruuk have to stay survive and crowd control, we already give up Serene Storm, which is the main DPS ability. If that's the case, how are we going to do to deal damage? We do not want to risk deactivate Elude to deal damage because that way Baruuk was still in danger. So how are we going to deal damage without opening up Elude too much? This is why we need to consider that can we compile all damage into a single shot so that we can minimize the risk of opening up the Elude gaps. When I look through all the abilities, I remember one ability that seems to be work quite well. Remember Excalibur Radial Blind? That's right, we'll be using the Mark for Death setup. Consider that Excalibur always use the Radial Blind armor, Radial Finish with the Mark for Death setup. I think this is the time that we will try to apply this to Baruuk, because Baruuk also have Lull, which is also an ability that can make enemies asleep. This will actually allow us to finish and kill more easily, and consider that Mark for Death require to spread all the damage to all the enemies around. We'll be using this to compile all damage into a single enemy and burst it to the whole other enemies in the room. So for our build here, because we want to make sure that Elude has a full 360 degree of dodge radius, that's why we will be using a rank 4 overextended and a full rank auger reach. because I want to use Auger Reach for the Auger set bonus, so we'll be using rank 4 overextender so that we can reach out to the minimum value of 200% range for our Elude. And because we have Lull here, we want to rely on endless Lullaby, this Augment is also required. Now, for our mark for death here, we don't have the radio finish Augment like the radio blind did that can increase the damage to the finishing Q. That's why mark for death damage must make sure that it can deliver the highest damage as possible, and I consider that we need to deliver at least the same amount, which is 100%. That's why to increase back up to 100%, we'll be using the Transit Fortitude and Intensify to cover back up the negative strength and back up to 100%. Streamline and Arcane Energize here because we still need to cover the energy problem a little bit. Quick Thinking, Rolling Guard, and Brief Respite here so that we could try to stay alive as much as possible, because most of these will be required, as well as Punisher Fooder, Self Stagger, and most importantly, we're using Arcane Trickery because finishing Q can actually trigger this part. When you become invincible, you can further enhance your survivability. Just like I mentioned, this build can actually so energy hungry that you will always run out of energy so quickly. So we decided to go with 2 Amber Archon Shards and 2 Azure Archon Shards so that we will be able to afford a lot of energy for us, which will need the extra 100% energy or effectiveness and extra energy maximum, so that we will make sure that we still have enough energy for us to spare. And because we're going with the mark for death, we want to develop the maximum damage in just one shot, which is why we're still going with the strongest melee weapon, the hammer. The best hammer you can go for is Frogger Prime. Unfortunately, I don't have one. That's why I'm using Arcatitron, but that's okay. If you want to go with the finisher Q, it's a very simple build. All you need to do is slot in as many damage as possible. This includes damage, finisher damage, the element, which I'm going with Corrosive here, and crits. Yes, it's still skill with combos, so you can go with crit and blood rush if you wanted to, combo, and attack speed. This will speed out the finishing Q animation. And there you have it. I really don't recommend you to try this build because it is too hard to play with. Not only you have to go against what you know about Baruuk, but this build also don't have a good DPS that we really needed to. It only have a decent amount of KPN thanks to Mark for Death. But talk about DPS, especially you want to go against a hard unit such as Acolyte, don't hope that this build can help you out. That's why you still need an AoE weapon such as Kuwa Brahma to help you out, which is I already used one. So just take this for fun. If this is your first time watching, why not leave a like and subscribe to my channel so that you won't miss out any newest contents from me. Why not leave your comments down below if you got any ideas or thoughts you want to share with all of us. And that's it from me, and as always, I will see you all next time. Bye bye!